Hello, we are live. Let's say hello and welcome to this little webinar about how to digitalize external workforce management. I hope you all made it into this stream. My name is Thomas Müller, and I'm the managing director of the German company of Right People Group, and I have the honor to be your host for this little session. So why are we here? We at RPG, we've been working for the last 15 years on finding the best freelancers for our clients. And we actually just noticed that the way companies find and work with freelancers, manage freelancers, external workforce hasn't really changed over the last years. So we made it our mission to change that. It's still pretty ineffective, it's still pretty analog, and we want to do something about it. So we actually asked Søren Rosenmeier, who's the co-founder and CEO of Right People Group, to share his insights on workforce management and vendor management, and he will do so within the next 30 to 40 minutes. Before I hand over to Søren, maybe just a few words about this, the agenda and how we're going to set it up. So the whole webinar is going to be around 1 hour, 60 minutes, so until 5 in European time and in European time. And Søren's presentation is going to be 30 to 40 minutes. You have the chance to write down some questions. You can do so here on the top right in the comment sections on YouTube. You have to be logged in to YouTube in order to write a comment. And after the presentation of Søren of 30-40 minutes, we have the chance to do a little Q&A of half an hour and answer hopefully most of the question. So I would say, without further ado, I would hand over the word to Søren. Hello, Søren.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and welcome to all attendees. We are lucky to have people watching from all over the world. So I'm glad to give you this small presentation, and I will just share my screen here. And we will start off with a presentation in PowerPoint here. So my name is Søren Rosenmeier, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Right People Group. And Right People Group is the creator of the VMS platform called Onsiter.com that I will also show you in the end. You have my contact info up here, my phone number, and also my email. And to all of you, I mean, you are all very welcome to reach out directly to me if you have a question after the webinar, the things, collaborations, whatever you want to discuss, then I am super open for having a direct talk with you. So first of all, let's look, why do you want to spend 50, 60 minutes of your life in this session? I would say, first of all, we will look at why digitalize the use of external workforce. Second, we will look at centralized versus decentralized consultant procurement, pros and cons of different ways of doing this. And then we'll take a look at the key processes a digital solution must support. And I will give you some tips based on my views on what I think for each of these processes, what is key focus areas for you. And then we'll try to look out in the market of digital solutions, what type of solutions are out there. And then in the end, I'll give you a conceptual explanation and also a very short demo of our free digital solution for external workforce that is called Onsiter.com. So welcome to all of you, and I'm really looking forward to present for you, but also for your questions and the dialogue afterwards. So first of all, let's take a look at why does this subject matter at all? I mean, I think everybody agrees that the most important thing for any company is the competence you have in the company. That is what really, in the end, makes it or breaks it for a company. And if we divide that up into internal workforce and external workforce, there's a huge focus on the internal workforce. Every bigger company works with employer branding, works with talent acquisition, and like everybody knows the importance of this. But the truth is also that depending on what country and maybe what specific survey you look at, but somewhere in general between 30 and 50% of your competence are made up of external workforce. So this is a huge part of your competencies. And that is why it really matters to be good in using the external workforce. And I've written this book here called Leverage the Power of the External Workforce. It looks at this subject and looks at it from different angles. What makes you as an organization strong in using the external workforce? And some of the points from the book is also what I will touch shortly on in this webinar. So first of all, let's try to look at why do you want to digitalize your use of external workforce? And I think there are three main categories for why you want to do that. First, to get better price and to get better quality. Second, to increase your internal efficiency. And third, for compliance reasons. So if we look at the first, the price and quality, then the first step in this is that you get a broader reach in the vendor market. And this is actually a pretty fundamental thing that is different from other areas of procurement. Let's say you're buying steel, then it's a commodity, and maybe you want to center on one, maybe just two, and gather all your procurement there so you can have the best prices. I think that is a fundamental difference in procuring workforce, because here you want a broad reach in the market, so you have the chance of finding that exact person or that exact team for that specific need you have. And that means that you have to have a broad reach in the vendor market. Second is your own selection process. If you manage to get a good reach in the market, then you also have to be skilled in selecting the right person, the right solution. And that's also something a digital solution can support. And third is the cost. And I deliberately wrote here lower cost per work done instead of just lower cost, because the hourly rates or the daily rates is not always a good measure for what your actual costs are, because there's such a huge difference in getting the really, really great external workforce and getting the more medium and maybe even the bad external workforce when you look at what is your cost per work done. Efficiency, first of all, is a higher speed from need to solution. This is something that is truly important for the hiring manager that has a need. They often, when they have a need for external workforce, they need it now. So having a high speed from there's a need to actually have the solution, that is a key point that is very important to hiring managers and something a digital solution can support. And second is to minimize your internal time spent. That is the biggest transaction cost you have in this. So basically minimize the friction you have from getting external workforce in and getting them out again. And third is to have a better onboarding, offboarding of your external workforce, so when they come, they're ready to perform immediately and you get the maximum value out of it. And when they leave, you have the best foundation for getting all the knowledge into your team. Third is compliance. And first one is to actually be compliant with the laws of your country. And that includes, for instance, tax regulation. And in Europe, it includes GDPR compliance. And second is to have the correct and approved contracts to be used by the hiring managers. And third is to actually have an overview of your external workforce. In many of the companies that I talk to, if they want this overview, then they have to talk to department managers, gather spreadsheet, and then they can have approximate overview. So these are the primary reasons that we see for digitalizing your use of external workforce. And I think let's try to look at different perspectives of these reasons, because organizations are not just organizations. They're made of departments, of people, and different people have different perspectives on what matters. And I think if you look at what is critical to those hiring managers that actually need the consultants, then it's highly critical with the quality of the people they hire. And it's highly critical that they can get it fast, and it's highly critical that it's easy to use. This is something they do once in a while. It cannot be a super complex process. On the other hand, if you look at a central department, most often procurement, then there are other perspectives that matter. So instead of quality, price might be a more important consideration, and instead of speed, being compliant with the process is more important. And thirdly, also having the right data and the right reporting on an organizational level is very important. So this slide is just to say, when you implement a digital solution, be aware that different things matters to different people. And when you implement the digital solution, for instance, with the hiring managers, then focus on the things that makes life easier and better for them in the digital solution. Now I will go to actually looking at centralized versus decentralized consultant procurement. And I made here two what you can call archetypes of how you organize consultant procurement. So one to the left is that you centralize it. That is often done by procurement. So we say that everyone who has a need, they need to go to procurement, and procurement reaches out to different vendors. They bid in, procurement goes back to the hiring manager, do the selection together, etc. So that is a centralized process. And on the other side, we have the decentralized process, meaning that the hiring manager, the person who actually have the need, they execute their own processes. And if we look at the pros and cons of these two archetypes, and I call them archetypes because most companies are somewhere in the middle. But if we look at pros and cons, then for the centralized solution, then you actually have a consistent process, and you ensure that there is competition every time, because you include multiple vendors. So you have a certain reach in the market, and you have competition every time. The problem with this is that in many of the organizations that I know, the hiring managers, they actually hate it. They think it's too slow, too bureaucratic. And you're introducing a chain here, and chains always come with bureaucracy. And also, this takes time for a procurement department to sit in the middle of this and coordinate all these things. So these are the pros of having a centralized solution. But on the other hand, if you look at the decentralized solution, then the pros are that it's a fast and agile process, and the person who has the need, the hiring manager, they can have the direct dialogue with the vendor. The problem is that hiring managers are not procurement machines. And what that means is that they actually often, they call a friend. And this means that this is a perfect situation for a vendor because there's no competition. They can just bid in a consultant solution, and that it's very convenient for the hiring manager. The problem is with the price and quality, and that you pay too much for too low quality. And it's not the way you want to scale your consultant procurement across the organization. So the key point for me in this is that a very important part for me of a digital solution to handling this is that it takes the best of both worlds, that it puts a tool in the hand of those who has the need, but makes it super easy for them to have a smooth process and have competition. So that is what I see as a primary purpose for a digital solution. So let's move on to actually look at what processes a digital solution must support. And we have this wheel here, and you can just take a 5-second look. So this is actually a wheel that also goes around what process you need to go through as an organization every time you hire external workforce. After this slide, I will go through each of these and give you some key tips on what I think you should focus on for each of these processes. So first, just to go through the circle quickly. First, you define what you need. Second, you reach out in the market and get X amount of solutions. Third, you select what solution you want. And in that process, you should also negotiate the price while there's still competition. And 4, 5, and 6, you onboard the consultant, you work together with the consultant, and you offboard the consultant again. So let's try to dive into these processes and and I will give you some actual tips for what I think is important in general and what a digital solution should support. So if we look at requirements, then first point is that you actually get a detailed and consistent description of what you need. And this is if you don't have a digital solution, this is normally handled by emails, and it is actually very, very hard to write down just on a blank email, write down all the things a vendor needs to know. And that means that you have these things back and forth, and that means that it's hard to include many suppliers because then the work just comes up. So that's a first part of a digital solution, that it makes it easy for you to, in a fast way, to capture all the requirements that the vendor needs to be able to give you the right solution. Second is, it's more a process thing than it is a system thing. But what we have seen in the last years with COVID-19 is that a new world have opened up for many companies where it has become a lot easier to work with remote people. And I personally believe that the winner companies of the future are those that are very strong in using remote English-speaking workforce. And if you look at external workforce, then it means that instead of, you have a tiny spot on the map where you can hire from, then it opens completely up your sourcing, and that gives you access to lower prices and better quality. Thirdly, this is, for me, quite an interesting point, because if you look at the internal competence in a company, all companies think about employer branding, talent acquisition, how do we make us attractive, etc. But for external workforce, very few companies really think about this. And of course, you can say you buy a service, they should just deliver it. But the truth is that it is people you're hiring, and people are people. They are motivated, and if you highlight the things that makes your project attractive, then you have the foundation for attracting the best, and you have the foundation for having the right price also. So that is something, maybe not to the same extent as for internal workforce, but if you just focus on this a little bit, then you differentiate yourself from other companies quite a lot. Second, let's look at the market reach. And the first point is that this matters. I mean, when you are hiring external workforce, it is important to have a broad reach in the market, because you want to find that person where the genius of delivering exactly what you need is located. And that is not in just one consultant company, for instance, with X amount of employees. So having this structured way of having a broad reach in the vendor market is a key part of a digital solution. Second, a good segmentation for this is to think about that there's freelance consultants and there are consultant companies with employed consultants. And sometimes you need a freelance consultant, sometimes employed consultants, but often it does not matter. It's more a matter of what person you can find, and therefore you need to reach out in both of these segments. The third part is that your digital solution must give you the central framework that makes it easy for the hiring manager to actually get this reach in the vendor market. Thirdly, let's look at quality assurance and negotiation. How do you select the right solution? Now you have a broad reach in the market, and how do you select? The first one is to actually be good at looking at the bids you get in and at CVs. So looking at stuff like, how long is the projects for this consultant? Does it match what you could expect? Does this consultant have returning customers, for instance? These kind of things that makes you good at analyzing CVs. And second is to have structured interviews with professionals. So structured means that you actually have an agenda that you want to go through. And I've been in hundreds and hundreds of these interviews where a customer meets a consultant for the first time. And often it is a rather unprepared and unstructured interview. And the problem with that is that it becomes a very superficial talk. And that's a big advantage for those that are super strong communicators. But if you look at, for instance, let's say very technical software developers, then they're not always good at talking in this high level, but they're much better in talking about something very specific. So having a structured interview where we really go into depth with the things that the consultant need to do is a really good thing. And then the other part with professional means to include people from the team that actually knows about the core of this subject. And you want to do that for two reasons. One is so that you can actually have a professional, in-depth discussion with the consultant. But two is to get ownership from those who are actually going to work with the consultant. Because if they have been a part of choosing this person, then you have a completely other accept than if it just dumps into the team. So structured interviews with professionals. And three is that this is the point where you want to negotiate price. You don't want to choose and then negotiate price. You want to negotiate while you still have different options to choose from. Fourth, onboarding. So the first thing is to actually have the basics in place before the consultant start. And that means, for instance, access to different systems. It means access to a PC, etc. We see often that this can take maybe several weeks, and that means that the consultant is prohibited from doing optimal work. So have these basics in place before they start in a structured onboarding process. And second is to think like you do with permanent employees. And it doesn't have to be like you have weeks of workshop, but just a short session where you really get into the depth with what are we doing here? What is the purpose? Because as I said before, this is people, and people works best if they know the true purpose of what they are doing. And it's a big differentiator from many other companies. And third is like a practical thing. Instead of spending 3-4 people hours in telling the same stuff every time, then do video-based training that the consultant can see before they start. If you have all these things in place, then the consultant can jump pretty much into the organization and start working and adding value immediately. Fifth, the execution. So one point here is that the transaction cost here are lowered so that it's easy to do contracting and, for instance, extension of contracts. It's easy to do time reporting. The invoicing process is set up smooth. Second is to actually measure the quality, because if you have a super strong consultant in one department on one project that ends, maybe you can use that consultant in another project. Then you know he fits the organization, he's super strong, and he knows all the aspects of the organization that make the onboarding lighter. So having that quality measuring and sharing of that data across, that's something a digital solution can add. And three here is to learn from consultant experience, because consultants, if you take this from the macro level, consultants or external workforce, they're coming in to your organization for a period, viewing it from the outside, and what they see can be quite the truth. So try to capture that, what they see, and their recommendations for how to improve certain stuff. They are not biased from political perspectives and all that, so they can be pretty rational and objective. So learn from the consultant experience. And 6 is to actually offboard consultants. This is a big thing against using external workforce, where you hire them, they're there for a period, and then they leave with all the knowledge. But the first thing here to focus on is to actually have the basics in place. For instance, to remove them from the system, so you don't have a security risk of having consultants that are actually stopped. They also have access to different systems. So I have a structured process for that. Second is something that I think a lot of companies, they overlook, and that is that many consultant companies, when their assignments stop, they're actually very interested in having like a flexible connection to your company, and often without any retainer fee or something, so that you get that contract so that you can use them on an on-demand basis. That means that you have access to the knowledge they have whenever you need it. And third is that you actually do a structured knowledge handover, that you have some kind of template for what are the key things we should look at when somebody is leaving, so that we make that knowledge handover. And in some processes, in some use of external workforce, you can even include that from the beginning. So maybe have these sessions where maybe you partly train your own employees from the expert knowledge of the consultant, but it's also partly training, partly knowledge handover. So the last part of this is what you can do with a digital solution, and that's actually collect data across the organization. The first thing is to actually know an overview of your external workforce. What do you spend? Who do you have? What vendors? What hiring managers hires? What have this overview? This is something that in most companies it requires that you talk to different department managers and you gather spreadsheets, and then you have a rather inaccurate picture of your external workforce. Second is looking at these costs, looking at being able to slice and dice this data, so you can, for instance, see, okay, the external workforce we hire from this company or from this region, they actually perform really well and it's a fairly good prices. Maybe we should take a strategic action, take a database strategic improvement and put more spend over there. So being able to collect the data and actually use that data in your organization. So that was walking through the processes, and now we will look at what types of standard external workforce digital solutions are out there. And I think there are, you can say, two very broad categories of solutions. And one is what you can call a paid VMS, and another is what you can call an MSP solution. So the paid VMS, those are often rather large systems that you pay for, and that means that you as an organization can use these systems to manage your external workforce. I put in, for instance, a Legis or Beeline, it could also be SAP Fieldglass, these types of VMS systems. They are often fairly large and fairly complex systems. On the other side, you have the MSP solutions, and that means that you basically outsource how you procure external workforce to a vendor. And that vendor then has their system, their VMS that they use. So that companies like eWork, most present in Scandinavia, it's Workforce Logic from the US, those kind of companies where you basically outsource your procurement of external workforce to an administrative player that then handles the administrative part of this. The third type of solution is a category that we, to my knowledge, have invented, and that is a free VMS. And nobody gives anything away for free. So why is it that we have actually decided to give away Onsiter.com completely for free? That is so that we can bid, we in Right People Group can bid on your requests. So we have simply built a complete system for this, an intuitive system that's easy to use, that you can use completely for free, make direct contracts with your preferred vendors, explore new vendors, everything completely for free. And in exchange for that, basically we get in as a preferred vendor, which is a huge value for us in Right People Group to be able to bid on requests for a big important customer. So now I will move to, you can say, more of a product presentation, show you how do we think you should handle a digital solution for your external workforce. What is it that we have made to support this? And I will just explain to you the core flow of Onsiter, and then afterwards I will move to giving you a very quick demo of in the actual system. So imagine a hiring manager. They have a need for, let's say, a software developer. Then the first thing they do is that they create an assignment, and here they follow this template that ensures that they get down all the information the vendor needs to be able to bid on it, but also ensures that it's pretty fast to put down this information, because if there's a ton of fields that they have to fill in with all kinds of information, then it gets too cumbersome for the hiring managers. And then there are basically three ways the hiring manager can set out this need for competition. One is preferred vendors, two is the vendor universe, and three is the built-in marketplace. And I'll just go through them. The first, preferred vendors. When you as a company use Onsiter, then you can be as many users as you want, and then you're tied in so that you're all part of the same organization and can see each other's data. And you can create on an organizational level, you can create your preferred vendors and divide them into groups. And that means that when a hiring manager posts an assignment, then he can go right into and select what preferred vendors does he or she wants to shoot this out to. And then these preferred vendors, they get a link and they all bid in a structured way so that you as a customer, you have all the information you need for those consultants that are bid into this project. And it's compliant with, for instance, GDPR in Europe, so that you don't have CVs hanging in your inbox and stuff like that. So this is a way of streamlining the process you have with your preferred vendors and making them available right at the hand of the hiring manager, and thereby solving this, you can say, this centralized, decentralized dilemma. Our business model here is that this is something we give away completely for free. So you make, as a customer, you make direct contracts with your preferred vendors. If they bid in to €100 per hour, then you pay €100 per hour, and you can even, in the platform, with your own contracts, make a direct contract with these preferred vendors. So this is how we handle the vendors you already know. The second part is about finding the vendors that you don't already know, and we call it a vendor universe. So what we have done here is that we have simply found all IT and management consultant companies. And what we do is that we simply index the data of their websites. So for instance, for Scandinavia, we have about 4,000 vendors with more than 5 employees, and our platform indexes the content of their websites. And that means that any type of need you have, you can do a keyword search, and then you immediately get a brutal list of the vendors that write about this on their website, sorted by our algorithm. So if you're looking for, let's say, cybersecurity, you can write cybersecurity, and then you get a list of cybersecurity companies. And our business model is exactly the same as up here. So we are not a commercial part of this. You get their contact info right away. You can call them, write them, do whatever you want. There's also a flow in the platform where you can mark those that you find interesting and then shoot out actually the same link as up here. And then you get, when they bid in a consultant, you get them in the same overview here. And then thirdly, there is our marketplace. And that means that consultants can sign up to Onsiter. And when you post a project, you can choose to either make it public or private. So if you make it public, then the consultants on Onsiter can see the project and they can bid into the project, and they will get into the same overview here of potential consultants you can choose for this project and take interviews with. Here we actually earn a profit. So here we put 5% on top, and that will be that you will see in your rate here. So basically you can say Onsiter is completely free. You only pay the rate that you actually see here. And if it's a vendor from the preferred vendors list or from vendor universe, it's the same as they have bid in. Here they put 5% on top. And the fourth part is that we also do our manual process. So we basically also become a traditional preferred vendor and do our active search and selection process and bid into the project. So that is the core flow of Onsiter. And now I will just move to doing a quick demo. If you have questions based on this or based on the previous slide, remember that you can put them down and we'll take them afterwards. And then I'll just change here to doing a short demo. And I hope you can all see my screen here. So this is how Onsiter looks. You have some shortcuts here. You can see all your assignments. I posted a lot of assignments in this user. And down here, there's different how-to guides, but there's also different templates. So there are, for instance, templates for how you could offboard contractors. There's also templates for how we think you do really, really good structured interviews with different types of consultants. So this kind of you can say our information universe down here. But let's try to look at the actual functions here. So if you go to vendors, this is where you can create your preferred vendors. So whenever you make a new vendor here and add them to a specific list, here you can create a new list, and here you can add a vendor to one or more lists. Then it's available to every user of Onsiter that is connected to your organization. So in this list I made here, you have 5. In this list here, you have 3. But I could go in and add another one, then we would have 6. And this can both be, it's basically, as you can see here, it's basically emails lists. So you could have it maybe an account manager for a consultant company. You could also have a list of, let's say, 50 freelance consultants that you use for various things that you then put in a list so they're accessible to everyone. And remember, when you send out to these vendors, you make direct contract with them and completely for free. So let's try to actually make an assignment here. So let's say that I'm maybe I'm a development manager and I have a need for a consultant. Here I can see all the projects that we have, all the assignments we have previously made across the organization. So let's try to click here and create an assignment. So let's say that I need a Python developer. I'll put in the title. Here I will put in some kind of description of what I need. And then you'll see here, it reads what I've written here. So I can just click in the different required skills. What this means is that the consultant or the consultant vendor, they have to rate themselves on these required skills. So let's say this person should also know about Azure, for instance. There's a huge API where you can choose from, but you can also make your own skills here. And that means in your overview of consultants, everybody will have rated themselves on these required skills you have set here. You choose language, and then you choose here practical details. I'm in Copenhagen now here, so it suggests that. How long is it? When does it start? How many hours per month? And here you put in a target rate. And when you sign up, you choose your currency. So let's say now I'm here in Danish kroner. So let's say that I have a target rate of, let's say, 800 Danish kroner. What that means is that this is actually not published on the project. But what this means is that the vendor, if they put in, let's say, 1,000 Danish kroner, then they get a warning saying this is above the target rate of the customer. You should consider lowering your price. So this is a way basically to nudge the vendors to give the price that you expect. But there can also be a situation where you simply don't know. You want to just see what the market brings in, and then you can just leave it blank. Here you can ask questions, yes or no. And down here, this is where you either make it private or public. So this is just a dummy project. So I will just make it private here. So when we post the assignment here, if I have not made it private, I would get bids from the marketplace, meaning the consultants that have signed up to Onsiter. We, as Right People Group, would do our manual search and selection process and bid in. And then you can very easily go here to the preferred vendors. So these are the vendors that you as an organization have created up here. And you can select either a group, or you can select, you can go in and deselect specific. So you can choose exactly who do you want to send this out to. And then you proceed to making a message. You can edit this message if you want to. You can also send it out here. So let's say this looks fine. So basically, this is the effort that it takes for a hiring manager to have a consistent process where they capture all the relevant details and they set it out for real competition. And then you can see here, let's go into an old assignment to see how it looks when vendors, they actually bid in. I have just dummy data here. So you would get all this information from every candidate that's bid in: a title, 3 key selling points, when can they start, what is the hourly rate, where they're located, who's the vendor, how do they rate themselves, and then you can see all the people that have bid into the project. And you can move on here to hire the contractor. And that means actually that here you can have your own contracts uploaded. So you probably have a contract that legal have made, or many different, and here you can just choose them, and then you can go further in the flow and send it to the consultant. Then the consultant company sign, you sign, And then it's a super fast way of handling that you use the correct contracts. So this is how you make an assignment, and this is how you get bids for the specific assignment. And then I'll just show you here a very few quick points here. Time is running, right? We're into 40 minutes now. So let's look at, for instance, let's say Python here in the vendor universe. So this is where I search for companies. Now I have a filter on Denmark. This is where I search for consultant companies with more than 5 employees that write about this specific keyword on their website. So I can see here, yeah, these are the relevant companies in Denmark. I can say, yeah, these 3, let's say that they look interesting. And then I can simply go further here and say it's about this project here. And I create a message here. So if I send this out, these 3 companies that I didn't know before, they will get a message on their email saying, this company needs a consultant. If you're interested, then follow this link and bid in. Contractors here, this is where this is on a company level, then this is on an individual level. So here you can search for consultants in whatever specific area here. And then you'll get the consultants that writes about this, and you can see their profile, and you can invite them to the specific project. Reports and statistics. This is where you have your overview of external consultants. So let's say that we want to see, let's say, for instance, the last quarter of last year, what consultants did we have there? So there we see a list, there we see a graph here, trending. Okay, these are the total cost. We could also go and see how many contractors did we have per month. And down here, we have a list of the actual contractors that have delivered 1 or more hours in this period. We can add columns to the list here. So we have more information, and we can download it to Excel, and we can change the currency to what we want. So this is a way of getting a complete overview of your external workforce and being able to export it to Excel or do whatever you want with it. So this was basically the presentation from my side and the demo of Onsiter, that is our digital solution. So I will just try to stop here, and then I think I will bring back the word to my colleague and good friend, Mr. Thomas Møller.
Thanks a lot, Søren, for the presentation. And as we see on YouTube, there are a couple of questions that are posted already. So it's good. You're perfectly in time. We still have 15 minutes, a bit more than 15 minutes to answer those. Let me just put in the first one. The first one says, let me try to bring it in. 1 second. The first one was coming actually from Ms. Johansson, saying, can you also use a VMS system for skill management system or for skill management?
That is a really good question, and it depends, of course, on what the person means with skill management. But my perception is, it's like, let's say you have a need of a hiring manager, then you're not necessarily looking for external workforce. You could also be looking for internal workforce, right? So you can say, maybe you should have some kind of solution where you can search for both. And then you can say, the question is, should you use your vendor management system also to manage the skills of your internal employees? Because that would solve this, right? Then you could just look at, but I think you have to be careful here, because it's very tempting when you are talking about this VMS system to let that handle everything. But it's a big task actually to manage skills, because skills is not a static thing, right? That's something that you need employees to update. What are their actual skills? And there we are very much also going into the scope of a traditional HR system, let's say Workday or something like that. So my personal opinion is that a vendor management system or a digital solution for external workforce, you should use that for external workforce. And you should use your HR system for internal workforce. That would be my recommendation. We actually had the considerations in Right People Group and in the development of Onsiter. Should we develop this so that people can update their skills? But I think you need to be aware that this is a huge task to make everybody update their skills. Let's say every 6 months. You really, really need a committed organization to have data for skills management that you can actually trust. So I would say yes, for external workforce, like in the reporting section of Onsiter, you could also see what skills you have hired, for instance, and you can have quality ratings, etc. So, but my recommendation would be not to use it for skill management for internal workforce.
Right, makes sense. And which I also understood is like you could actually use it, but actually you would advise against it because updating all the skills in your employee for your internal employees is just too much of a task to keep.
You have to have a really committed, because there's only really one person that can do it, and that is the employee themselves. And let's say they've worked with a new framework for the last year, then you look for that, but you don't find anything. Maybe it's because of that 60% have actually not updated the system, and then you stop trusting it, and then nobody use it, and then you get into a negative spiral.
Right, makes sense. But there's some other questions as well. One that is taking it one step back. We've been talking about VMS, but you also mentioned an MSP system. And here's a question that was posted, asking, can you elaborate again on the difference between a VMS system, maybe also explaining one step ahead what does it stand for again, what is it again, and an MSP system?
Yes, and actually maybe I would not call it, at least in our terminology, and terminology can be different for different people and different. But for me, an MSP is more of a solution or provider. So hiring an MSP company or an MSP solution means basically that you say, I don't want to handle this myself. I hire this vendor to take care of the administrative part of of uh, of using a VMS system. So often these MSP vendors, they would have their own VMS systems that they use. So you can say when you're hiring an MSP solution, you're basically outsourcing how you procure external workforce. And that is, I mean, for some companies, that is a really, that can be a good solution. I think personally, and that's also why we have built Onsiter as not as an MSP solution, but as a VMS solution that the companies can use. I think that this is something that you as an organization need to handle. And then you need a system that can automate as much as possible, but you are in control of it. For me personally, I would not outsource how you procure external workforce to another company. This is so important that I want that, but I just want a VMS system that can facilitate that and give me the data across the organization.
Right. For everyone who's still watching, there's still a chance to post some questions in the comment section of LinkedIn. I've heard there were some technical issues, but it's probably because there's you need to be logged in with your YouTube account in order to post question. If there's still questions left after the session, you can also ask us directly or Søren directly. But there are some more ones one that is actually very much practical, facing or talking about the practical implementation of such a vendor management system. And there's a person asking, what's the biggest challenge, in your opinion, probably when implementing a vendor management system in an organization, probably assuming that you don't have a vendor management system at all yet?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, the biggest challenge is, first of all, to make the hiring managers use it. And I think that's something that you need to look at when choosing your digital solution. Is this something that the hiring managers, those that actually have the need, is this something that they like? is this a concept that they like? Is it a system that they like? Because if you have that foundation, then you have the foundation for them using it. And then I think so, because there's also a big difference. Let's say an email system, that's something you use every day, or the many systems that are your standard system. But this type of system is something that you as a hiring manager, you use once in a while. So it has to be super intuitive and super easy to use. And you also have to consider, you can say, when implementing a vendor management system, you have to consider the change management part of this, that they don't just call the friend they have and then get a solution, and then they can sneak it in the back door and with having the vendor created and stuff like that. But but you actually ensure. That's also why I had that slide about the different perspectives, highlight the 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 advantages for them, so that they actually have a true interest in using the VMS system. And then you can say, if we look at this challenge, then there is also another way, and that is that it's simply impossible to pay the vendor if, for instance, the timesheet is not approved in the vendor management system. So that's kind of a hard stop. That means that you ensure that is used, and you find those people in the organization that are not using it for some reason. Maybe they've just forgotten about it, or there's a million other things. So for me, that is the biggest challenge, to have a digital solution that the hiring managers, they actually love and want to use, and that they are consistently using it. The technical part and those things, that is easier.
Right, right. When talking about technical implementation, is there anything, I often hear that question when it comes to integrations to other systems. Is that something that you would recommend, something you wouldn't do, like the technical implementation part?
I think one thing is, for instance, integration to ERP systems, so that when a contractor reports time, then it's placed in the correct, the cost is placed in the correct parts of the ERP system. So you can, when you approve the timesheet, then it's approved in the ERP system, etc. And my recommendation would be to start not too wide, make the basic fundamental, the fundamentals of the core reason why you want to use the VMS system, make that work, and then potentially expand the scope later. And why you want to use, I mean, we saw this, I had these 9 different reasons for why you actually want to use a VMS system, and there can also be other than those 9 reasons, of course, and they would have different priority for different companies. So if you can say that cost overview in your ERP system is super important for you, then maybe it's right to go with that immediately and have an integration to your ERP system, for instance. But I think I would in general recommend to start with a smaller scope that handles the 70-80% of what's important to you, not make it too complex, and make that work, and then potentially expand the scope when you have a solution that people actually like and love.
Right, right. So back to the topic, it's rather the human factor, the change management part is more important than the technical implementation.
I think everybody that has worked with implementing systems, they come to this conclusion again and again, no matter what type of system is, that it is more about the people and the change management part and training people and making them understand the concept and like it and use it, than it is the technical difficulties. Of course, the features have to be there. The system has to be something that makes sense for those users. So it's not that it's not important, but that's more what you have to consider when selecting your digital solution. Does that fit what we need? But when actually implementing it, I think you really have to pay attention to the change management part, and also listen to what people they say. Actually, maybe it's not just that they are complaining because it's something different. Maybe they're right. Maybe there is just super annoying for them to use this vendor management system because of this and this, and then you have to actually listen to that and make the changes that are needed.
Right. Right. Very nice. I would say, looking at the time, we have around 5 minutes left, and there's still a few questions to tackle. There's
Great.
one. I hope it's not too long for this banner. No, it's not. It says, like, companies are using different types of external workforce, e.g., like consultants, factory busy time helpers, subcontractors, and service providers. What would you say is the best? What system is the best to manage all these types together?
Yeah.
Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I think if you look in this, you can say the paid VMSs that I mentioned, then these are really huge and complex systems that you pay for, and they have all these also. Especially, maybe I think some of these are originated in US, and they have very much things that are aligned with US laws, etc. So maybe if you have very complex needs in all of these types, maybe you need to look at some of these paid solutions. What what we have done in Onsiter is basically, you can say, to make a solution that solve 80 to 90% of the problem, and that is that you can upload your own contracts, and that means that you can very easily use your own contract with the vendor, and then you can have input from your legal department saying, okay, for these type of things we want these contracts, for these type of things we want these contracts, um, and then you can make that. But you can say the um, the scope for Onsiter at least is vendors more than it is, let's say, a temporary employment of a person that, let's say, you hire to be temporary hired as a, with say, internal workforce for 6 months. So depends on. I would not be able to answer that what system is the best, but I would say if your scope can be handled with, for instance, our system, then it's a very easy, lightweight, easy to use solution. But it might be that we find that if the person who said this question, that we find that, okay, here it does not work, and then maybe you need to look at the, you can say, the the big suppliers of these massive systems like Beeline, Fieldglass, Legis, these kind of systems. And maybe
Right.
there's also, I'm not sure actually where you can say the traditional HR systems like Workday or similar they are, because that could also be a combination that you say, okay, some parts of this are actually within the scope of our HR system, where our VMS system, we only use that for truly external vendors. So that would probably be my recommendation, because it's well aligned with our system, but you might have other needs, and maybe so that's very subjective, but I think
But your
those are the
take
options.
your take would be that, let's say, also Onsiter or VMS system is not only for a specific type of workers. It would not, or like from a specific industry, it would not only be IT freelancers or external workforce in the IT space, but from all different industries.
um, I would say yes, there are elements of that. For instance, the preferred vendors in Onsiter, there you can create any vendor you want, and that vendor can bid in any type of resource that they want, and you can hire them with a contract, etc. So that is indifferent. The preferred vendors part of Onsiter is indifferent of what type of person and what skills it is. But you can say this vendor universe that we have, that is the vendors we have in there are IT and management consultant companies. So they are not construction worker suppliers, for instance. So they're part of the systems that you can use, the vendors that you know, they can do whatever you want and complete have direct contracts. But you can say this thing about exploring new vendors, that is in the IT and management consultant part.
Right. All right, then I would say there's one last question left, and we still have a minute to go. So, Søren, make it quick.
I will.
Try to make it quick. There's one. Is there a difference in the requirements of a VMS for remote teams compared with on-site teams? I would say
Uh,
requirements for a VMS system. If there's a clarification, but maybe you can give your take on that in general.
I think one big requirement is what vendors you put in, because most vendor management systems you can create your vendors, right? So you need to have vendors that are good in supplying remote workforce. And let's say that I'm located here in Denmark, in Copenhagen. So if I only have very local players in my VMS system, then they would not be super good in finding remote workforce. So I would look at the vendors. It's one of in Right People Group. It's one of our strategic priorities to be super strong in delivering quality assured remote workforce, because I think that is the future of the winning organizations, that they can use remote external workforce. So that's something that we have spent a lot of time, you can say, us selecting a bunch of different vendors from different countries that are good in specific areas, and having processes for finding the best freelancers across a broad sum of countries. So I think most VMS systems, to answer the questions, the requirements for the VMS systems is probably pretty much the same, but the vendors that you put in must, of course, be good in supplying remote external workforce.
Great, thanks a lot. And then I would say this questions is answered as well. And with that, we are on time. Please, thank you all for staying here. There are Søren's contact details again. Please reach out if you have any other, let's say, questions or things to discuss, or maybe even things you didn't like at all about the requirements that Søren put
Yeah,
on.
that would be great. And that can, I mean, that could be any type of collaboration, any ideas you have, or inspiration you got or did not get. Or I'm super open. You can do this, or you can also connect to me on LinkedIn, and I would be very happy to have a talk with you. This is our first webinar, so I'm super excited to see what dialogues and what initiatives and stuff this can bring up.
Right. Thanks a lot, Søren, for your presentation. And then I would say until next time, until our next webinar.
Thank you, Thomas. See you later.
See you later.